Grief isn't static, and it's not one emotion. It's a basket of emotions. Learning how to lean into dying, death, grief, and loss began with a death that I didn't want to lean into.
This connecting with ourselves and others, like loving, allowing, letting ourselves grieve, tear up. As you hear that, you may or may not viscerally feel that in your being. This is raw. This is real.
Death can be this really lovely coach because death doesn't go away. Death never quits on you. We can befriend death. We let death shake us, educate us.
How can love and grief be a team that support us in our growth?
What a great question.
I just want to quickly thank you for beginning to watch this podcast episode. If you haven't subscribed yet, feel free to do so. Would love it if you join our community. You'll also be up to date on the latest content, and this really helps me reach out to more guests. You can also visit our website, centerformindfulness.ca. There's free events about mindfulness and laughter. Hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome, everyone, to today's episode. I am truly honored and deeply thrilled to share the conversation with Reverend Stephen Garrett. We're going to be talking about a subject that's actually going to be a life changer. It's a subject that's often kept in the shadows, a subject that sometimes is taboo to speak about, which is the subject of death, dying, and grief. Talking about it can help us truly live a more inspired life with less denial, less fear, and more love. Reverend Stephen Garrett is a deaf shaman and an end-of-life coach. Now, even as you hear that, you may or may not viscerally feel that in your being. This is raw, this is real, and I find him so inspirational as he speaks with deep passion and actually very captivating as he's turning a difficult subject into sexy subject. So first, a warm welcome to you.
Hi, Kasim. I like that, turning a death subject into a sexy subject. Like, I'm on the same page, brother. Thank you for that.
Thank you. It's truly an honor to share this conversation with you. And for those who are not as familiar with your work, I just want to say a few more things because you've done incredible work over the years. So Reverend Stephen Garrett, you may already be feeling it from a few moments, and you'll see. But he lives life fully. He's someone who's genuine, and his heart is committed to a life of a true warrior, which bring qualities of integrity, strength, leadership, kindness, and wisdom. What's actually amazing is his background. He's experienced success in life in so many fields as a teacher, investment banker, social worker, author, cremationist, interfaith minister, like that's a long list, executive director of the Memorial Society of BC as a grief and loss counselor for Campbell River Hospice Society, and in his current role as a trainer for Rhodes Wellness College in Vancouver. It's a lot of titles, a lot of experience. He has written 4 books, the 2 most recent, and I'll put this in the show notes. When Death Speaks, Listen, Learn, and Love. What a beautiful title. Then followed by When Cancer Came Knocking, How One Family Answered. And by the way, that really spoke to me because cancer has affected my family, including my father who passed away. So maybe we'll cover that too. Reverend Garrett is dedicated to help us transform the approach to dying and death and grief from an outdated notion of the Grim Reaper. It's so true, such an outdated sense, to a more helpful image of an inspirational teacher. Wow. Where do we begin? I mean, where did you begin this journey and discovering this area that's no one can avoid, but really pulled you? Where did this begin for you?
Oh, Kasim, that's such a great question. Way back, May the 5th, 1988. It was a Thursday night. It was 6:30, and my phone was ringing off the hook. And back in those days, the phone was kind of on the wall. We didn't have cell phones so much.
The corded phones. I remember those days. I actually remember the dial, the like ding 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 ding, the dial.
Exactly. So I'm coming into my house, and the phone's ringing off the hook. It had that urgency to it. So I pick it up and it's my brother-in-law, Roy. And he said, Jody's gone. And I said, where to? Mexico?
Mm.
He couldn't speak. He passed the phone to his mother, and his mom said, Jody died tonight. And I didn't know what to do. I think I was shocked, and I went into take care of business mode as Garrett men were trained to do. I said, great, thanks. I'll go see my parents. I drove all the way up to Thornhill from Toronto and told my folks and got the job done and went home and fell asleep,
Mm.
kind of unconscious.
Mm.
Went to the funeral home, struggled a lot. I didn't want to see her dead body. It's like too raw.
Yeah.
But I walked to the casket and saw her and said my tearful goodbyes. I was honored to be a pallbearer for her. So I
Mm.
carried her casket into the church. I carried her casket back to the hearse and from the hearse to the gravesite. At graveside, when I was lowering her casket into the ground, something happened to me. A switch went on, Kasim.
Mm.
All of a sudden, I became incredibly present and I was shocked out of that kind of numb state we get into. It was like everything became alive. It was like, oh my God,
Mm.
Jody's dead. What just happened?
Disbelief totally landed, seems. Yeah.
Totally. Like, it was just like thump.
Oh.
And there was no disbelieving anymore. She's 6 feet underground.
Mm.
And I remember tapping my heart just like this and saying, Jody, I don't know what just happened. I'm going to find out. This doesn't make any sense. And so I made a commitment, graveside commitment to my sister's heart. And about 6 months later, I quit my job as a corporate finance guy and became a social worker. And now here I am.
Wow.
So just notice, Kasim, that my rebirth into learning how to lean into dying, death, grief, and loss began with a death that I didn't want to lean into.
Mm.
I didn't want to acknowledge my sister Jody was dead. God bless her. I loved her so much, But for whatever reason, I leaned in.
Mm.
So I've learned how important, how sacred, and how special it is to lean in. And I actually learned, Kasim, that was my way of honoring my love for my sister, was to lean into her,
Yeah.
not to push her away.
See this. Thank you for sharing that, because I can feel the it's not a heady thing. Like you really leaned into wanting to understand, and there's almost like an unfairness, like the unfairness of losing a loved one. Like, what the heck? Why them? Like there's this, like, not them, not this family or this friend.
Yeah.
Like there's something about unfairness, and I don't know, is that part of it for you too? Like,
Yeah, it did feel unfair. Like she
mm,
was 36. She was just
yeah.
the height of her life. She had a lovely husband. She was a great community volunteer. She volunteered her time at a women's shelter. She made really lousy coffee, which I really enjoyed. And it just, and then there was part of me too that felt it should have been me.
Mm.
I felt guilty in a way that I'd survived and sweet dear Jody hadn't. There
Ah.
was something weird about that it took me a while to even allow myself to breathe and live again. It's like it felt so wrong that I was alive and she was dead. It was just like, no, no, no. I remember saying to God, I call God grandmother, Grandma, you took the wrong person. Please, please bring Jody back.
Mm.
Take me,
Wow.
take me. And Grandma said to me, wasn't the wrong person, honey. It was her time. I said, Grandma, take my BMW, take my stop off. You're like, man, take everything I've got.
So bargaining, really wanting to bargain with the
Oh,
reality. Like,
yeah.
come on, like, can we do some exchange here? Bring her
Yeah.
back. Yeah.
Kübler-Ross was right. I was going through some of her phases. I won't call them stages because they
Right.
don't really happen in an order. But I remember being on the beach in Toronto on way down in East End, Queen Street, and I'm out in the sand in my bare feet, kicking at it. So I was so angry and
Mm.
demanding that God listen to me, and we got to make a deal, baby.
Yeah.
And She had no interest in making a deal. Very lovingly, very gently, she patted the back of my hand and said, Stephen, she's dead.
Yeah.
Breathe, honey, breathe. Deal with it.
Mm.
Please deal with it. I'm not bargaining with you.
Yeah.
It was that clear and that raw. And all I could do, Kasim, when my bargaining effort failed, was I just dropped to my knees and just wept because
Mm.
the reality had sunk in that Jody's gone.
Mm.
Well, have her now is in the memory of my heart.
Yeah.
I'll never get to drink her lousy coffee again.
You know, even as you speak, it's so loving and honoring. Like you can remember things, there's humor, but so deeply honoring. And we'll talk, I know we'll get into it later in terms of the languages that you call the seven languages of sorrow. So we'll get to that. But I'm wondering as you're sharing this, the kind of the guilt. We'll talk about also regrets of the dying, but
Yes.
there's something about the guilt of those that are left behind. Like, you know, could I have done something? I should
Yep.
have said this. Like maybe if I did A, B, C, they would still be alive.
Yep.
And do you see that as well with families of
Oh, yeah.
those
Often.
who've passed?
Yeah,
What is that?
often.
What is that? What do you what are you?
Well, I don't know, Cashman. Like when I look at it, it's like because we don't embrace end of life,
Mm,
because we don't honor it, because we don't have death in the home anymore. It's
mm,
this foreign medicalized function that happens away from us. I think when we push death away, we also push immediacy or life away.
mm.
I got a whole long life. I don't have to say what I have to say to my loved ones now. I can wait. I can wait because death isn't down our nose anymore. It's not in the family home anymore. We don't
It
see it.
happens later.
Yeah.
Something
And
later,
so,
so we don't worry about it now. I think that's the tendency is like right now, for like we'll deal with it later.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So there's not this urgency, and I don't mean it like a panic. There's not this immediacy to
Mm,
say to somebody, hey, Kasim, I've really missed you, bro. It's so good to be back with you. I love you. We
mm.
don't say those things because we think we have a tomorrow.
Yeah.
But then we get to the tomorrow and our loved one's lying on their deathbed and we haven't said what we want to say to them and they're unconscious. And so we feel like it's too late.
Mm,
Sometimes it is.
yeah.
But the way through that, the beautiful way through that is speaking to their heart, even when the body is gone, and calling Jody present, or calling dad present, or calling mom present, and just saying, hey, mom, I wish I had said I love you more often.
Mm,
I didn't, but I sure wish I had. Mom, I'm saying to you right now,
mm.
I miss you like crazy and I love you so much.
Wow, beautiful.
We can do it even ex post. It's better though beforehand.
Right. If we get a chance. But you know what I'm hearing from you is space,
Yes.
allowing space in the heart to
Yes.
hold the ache of I could have said something to them, and still holding the space of I can say it now. I can still love and honor their energy. And there is some space, and that's something hard for so many people
Yep.
because we often deal by not avoiding even looking within.
Yep.
And this is one of the many things for me in my path that has helped me in terms of looking within through the counseling work I've done myself and mindfulness and meditation. Like, can I hold space for me? And so it's not always like, oh, I feel fantastic and wonderful and amazing. It's like, I feel deep agony, like
Yep.
with my dad's loss. It was painful. Like,
Yep.
and
Yep.
I wish it was different, but it wasn't.
Yep.
Yeah.
All we can do, Casim, you nailed it, is we can just hold space for ourselves to feel all of that. My sweet dear brother Peter died of cancer. I think your father died
Yeah.
of cancer.
Yeah.
And that's a walk, brother. It's a real walk. And if we actually walk together with our loved one, we feel profoundly and deeply
Mm,
for ourselves and for them.
mm,
I'm not sure what your father's walk with cancer was like, but my brother's walk was 6.5 years long. And he fought it with everything from the kitchen sink to the hammer in the garden shed. He fought like crazy because he so wanted to live. At
Mm.
the end of the day, none of those remedies worked,
Mm.
and he died.
Yeah.
And it was a hard one to watch
Mm.
because you could see him from his amazing, vibrant, alive, you know, 50-year-old fella that he was to this 61-year-old, frail, tiny, petite,
Mm.
gray, withered, hollow-cheeked shell of a man.
Mm.
Was still Peter. It sure didn't look like him,
Right.
you know? So we kind of lost him along the way. We were
Mm.
losing aspects of Peter along the way until finally he's on his deathbed and we're just all holding him in love. That's all we had left to do was just hold him in love.
Mm.
There's nothing more to do. And that's where it gets a little crazy making, Kasim, is there was nothing to do. It was done. It was like so raw. It was breathtaking because we knew that the ultimate result was one day soon there would be the final exhale and he would be dead. That was the hard part for our humanists to hold.
Yeah.
Has to be something we can do to save Pete's life. There's got to be. There wasn't. And that finality before his death was really hard to hold, especially for my mom, the second child that predeceased her, and also for Peter's amazing wife, April. It was so hard to hold that finality. I remember there was a time, if I may, April came out of the hospice room, the butterfly room at the hospice in Creston, BC.
Mm.
I was standing in the hall just catching my breath, and she was so given and so exhausted and so done. She said to me, "Well, she just damn well die,"
Mm.
you know?
Yeah.
And all that was she loved him so much. She was tired of seeing his suffering.
Yeah.
She was praying for a graceful, dignified end to her sweet husband's life. Came out in many would think, an inappropriate way. No, it wasn't inappropriate at all. It's her way, and she just needed to get it out.
Mm.
And all I said to her, I looked at her and I held her face in my hands. I said, I know, honey. I know. I love him too. She felt
Yeah.
my arms. So we just wept because it was
Yeah.
sad. There was nothing to do.
This connecting with ourselves and others, like loving, allowing, like letting ourselves grieve, tear up, uh, um, quiver, like all of it. And somehow in North American culture, it's like, you get 2 days off and it's supposed to be over, 3 days off, 4 days. Like,
Yep.
and grief, it's not an on-off switch. Like we're on and it's done. It's actually a lifelong. And as your work highlights too, it's such an ebb and flow. We'll have periods where we think it's over, and then boom, waves of deep
Yep.
pain and ache. Because it's not something we get over. It's something we be with. So, what have you found that really supports people in being with loss?
Well, one of the things I do, and right behind me here, Kasim, I have a family altar up
Mm.
here. It's hard to see, but I have a picture of my mom, Marge, who
Mm.
died a year and a half ago at the age of 94.
Wow.
A picture of my dad, who died in 2004. I have a picture of Jody, who died in 88. I have a picture of Peter, who died 7 years ago. So all my loved ones are here with me in spirit. And I have a candle there, and I have an eagle feather and a condor feather, and I have some smudge. And I just every day go up and tap my little altar and say hello to my family.
Mm.
That may sound a little simplistic or simple or like weird, maybe, but I got to tell you, it sure works for me.
Mm.
It's my way of reminding myself that who I am is a direct result of all those relationships that I had. Each one of my loves helped me form the great man I am today. My
Mm.
mom did, my dad did, my sister did, my brother did, my brother-in-law did. They were all part of the hammer and chisel carved me out
Mm.
of a bunch of flesh. And so why wouldn't I honor my family in that way? And some days, Cass, I cry. I look at my mom's picture. She's so beautiful and she's not here. I can't hug her anymore.
Yeah.
I can't send her favorite chocolates on her birthday. I can't pick up the phone and say hello anymore.
Mm.
Some days I am sad. Other days I have a smile on my face. Oh, mom, thinking about you, baby. I got this. So it moves and flows and
Mm,
changes. Grief isn't static, and it's not one emotion. It's a basket of emotions.
mm,
Numbness sometimes is the only emotion we can feel because the pain of the loss is so profound.
mm,
We have to allow ourselves to be numb for a while to catch our breath. And
mm.
there's nothing wrong with it. There's actually everything right with it. So it's a journey like that. And you're right, Kasim. You said we don't get through our grief. Most people want to get through it.
Yeah, just it's over, and when they're experiencing a lot of emotions, and it's like, what's wrong with me? Why am I not getting over this? Like it should be over. It's been like whatever. It's been 6 months. It's been a year. Well, it's like 2 years ago. It's like, well, it's just grief. It's gonna
Yep.
come. It's gonna go. And
Yep.
as you're pointing to this beautiful altar behind you, there's a sense of, um, I know you speak about that too, like death as a friend that
Yes.
keeps you, something about like reminding us to live and honor those who are gone and those who are here. I wonder if you can say a little more about like how has death been a friend for you?
Well, the late great leadership leader Stephen Covey used to teach in business, begin with the end in mind. So I don't think he meant lay on your deathbed and begin with that end in mind, but that's how I heard it. So I am impermanent, Kasim. I'm not going to last. I know that. It's fact. With that in mind,
Mm,
I imagine myself on my deathbed and I'm kind of unconscious. And my family and my friends are gathered around. What are they saying about me? So I want to engineer what they say about me. So when I am on my deathbed, they're saying, oh, that guy was amazing. He lived his life all the way up to this amazing crescendo. He was on fire till his last breath. He cared about people. He served people.
mm,
If that's what I want my friends and family to say about me, bring it right back here.
mm,
What do I have to do this day to have that sort of amazing crescendo where my friends are actually celebrating with me
mm,
before I take my last breath? So it's how do you engineer the life starting today? By befriending your death down the road.
mm. So it really becomes an inspiration to live fully,
Yes.
not to take this precious life. Like a lot of us may have it conceptually. Yeah, yeah, it's a short life. But
Yeah.
wait a minute. Like really? Like I mean, we don't know, may we live long lives, but we
Yeah.
don't know. Like it really is precious. And this befriending, you're naming it's like let's make the most and live this very, very precious life, which is so easy to forget. We get bogged down by our bills and
Yeah.
relationships, problems. How am I going to get through this week? Why is the groceries expensive? Like,
Yeah.
and then we just get almost like this illusion of busy. We get just so busy, we'll forget to live.
Yeah. 100%.
Mm,
It's all the distractions of life
mm,
that keep us away from recognizing how very precious and magnificent life is.
mm,
Whether you believe in reincarnation or past lives or not, doesn't matter.
mm,
I got one in this body, one. That's it. How am I going to live it? And, in honor of my commitment to befriending death, I have a tattoo on my chest, and it's a beautiful Maori skull, uh, which is there. And I got permission from a Maori elder to put that tattoo on me because I'm not Maori. And he
mm,
said, well, what are you going to use it for? And I said, well, I'm going to write on top, death, my dear friend, and on the bottom, and inspiring teacher. And he looked at me, he said, oh, you're kidding. I said, no. He said, do it. So I have, with the permission of a Maori elder, a Maori skull with death, my dear friend, an inspiring teacher written on it. So I've embodied my belief system, similar to embodying it.
mm. Wow. How powerful is that?
Yeah.
Like as a teacher, it almost keeps us in check. And
Yes.
as you're sharing this, remind me, I had a chance to be at a hospice for 4 years. I was a volunteer, almost 5 years actually,
Mm.
and it was really powerful. And what led me to it is loss. I
Yes.
lost a grandmother. I lost a dear friend. She was in her 30s at the time,
Yeah.
and it's like, what is this death? And what am I doing? like made me question my life. And I guess this is what death can do as well, the subject. It makes us examine our life. Like every week, literally, I
Yep.
walk out when I used to walk out from the hospice, it was just like a slap in the face.
Yep.
Like what okay, what am I doing? Why am I living this way? What do I need to correct, adjust? Because somehow it feels like we have short term memory.
Yes, we do.
Our own death.
Yep. Absolutely, Kasim. Very short-term memory.
Mm,
You know, and I used to work with men a fair bit, especially around men and purpose.
mm,
And I would link death to purpose. I could
mm.
feel the guys like, whoa. But really, you got to link the two.
Yeah.
What have you come here to do? If you want to preempt that midlife crisis that most of us go through in our 40s and 50s, let's
Mm,
get serious at the beginning of our lives. What did I come here to do? What's my
mm,
what's my purpose? What's my passion? And we
mm,
let death shake us. We let death educate us. Before you die, you got to get that done. And so death can be this really lovely coach
mm.
because death doesn't go away. Death never quits on you. It just stays right with you. And so if we can
Mm,
befriend our death or embrace our death, it doesn't mean that the grief's going to go away and we won't grieve. What it means is, oh, the grief is here.
mm,
Okay, let's hold it. Let's cherish it. I mean, people don't say to you, well, when are you going to get over the love of your dog or the love of your life or the love of
yeah.
your friend? Why would then they say, well, when are you going to get over your grief? It's the same thing. Grief and love are twins, they're joined.
Mm.
Never ask somebody, when are you going to get over the love of your child? Then why do you ask when are you getting over the grief of your child? It's the same thing.
So beautifully said. Is that, I'm so glad you're sharing this because there's in one of your writings, I wanted to read, a paragraph of it that really struck me, which is what you're speaking about right now. So if I may share this from your
Yeah.
writing, which is from, hold on one second. It's writing about the seven languages of sorrow.
Ah, thank you.
And I found this really profound. So I'm just going to read it. You say, I have realized that love and grief work as a unique team that truly supports our growth and evolution as spiritual being living this beautifully raw human life. However, too much love and we can turn into an artificial sweetener. I really love that. And then too much grief and we can turn into a sour and bitter person. How can love and grief be a team that support us in our growth?
What a great question.
Mm,
And because we have, we're on this crazy bipolar planet, eh, Cass? And we got a
mm,
North Pole and a South Pole.
mm,
So we're swimming in a sea of opposites. We
mm,
typically prefer one more than the other.
mm,
So we prefer love because it's fuzzier and softer and fun.
mm,
We tend to be adverse to grief, but they're the same. So how do we hold them both and not be preferential in choosing the love and avoiding the grief? Some some of the greatest writings in the planet, William Shakespeare, parting is such sweet sorrow, he wrote.
mm,
He wrote that line because his son predeceased him. He was speaking of the loss of his own son. And he said it in that order. Parting is such sweet sorrow.
mm,
And he was dead on right. We need the sweetness to balance the sadness. We need the love to balance the grief or the grief to balance the love. We can't get away from it.
Somehow we want to chop one off. And in mindfulness, what I've discovered is, there's non-dual perspective, they call it. So it's not this or that. I can be anxious and be calm. It's not like it's either this or that. It's either love or grief. It's actually both. How can we hold two things at the same time? Because otherwise, we're kind of cutting off parts of ourselves. We're closing doors. Like if you close the door of grief, we're also kind of closing the door to love. That's what.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I remember, Kasim, when I walked out of my brother's hospice room for the last time. Oh man, it's so real and it's so raw.
Mm.
And I remember kissing him on the forehead and saying to him, "See you next time."
Mm.
Because I don't believe in that kind of goodbye stuff. See you next time. And I turned and started heading to the door, but I had to stop.
Mm-hmm.
I looked over my right shoulder and I saw him. And I was overwhelmed with sweetness.
Wow.
The tears started pouring down my face. I knew him, and his suffering is almost over.
Mm.
And right beside it was the sorrow of I'll never get to hug him again.
Oh.
I'll never get my $100 back that he won at cribbage a couple of months ago. So, but the first feeling was the sweetness. And then Shakespeare came to my mind. I went, oh my God, that's what he was feeling. That sweetness first. And then it ushered in the sorrow. And this, as human beings, we're not used to being non-binary. It's good or bad or right or wrong or masculine or feminine, but they work together, both of them.
Yeah.
They're a necessary combination.
Mm.
Can't have one without the other. I have a book on my bookshelf written by Dr. Joanne Cacciatore. She's a traumatic grief specialist. And the title of the book is Grieving is Loving.
Mm. How it weaves together.
Yep.
They're both weaving together. And, this loving, and I wonder, the 7 languages of sorrow, it's something I'd love us to go into because I found it so useful.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about what led to that and what are the different ways that helps us in terms of working through our grief of losing loved ones, whether it's a person or a pet, because pet loss is painful too. So
Big time.
yeah. So what are these 7 languages of sorrow?
A few years ago, I was reminded of the book, The 5 Love Languages. And knowing that love and grief are twins, I went, oh, if there's love languages, there's got to be grief languages. So I checked on the internet. There's nothing entitled, the 7 languages of sorrow. So I thought, okay. So I started looking at my clients and noticing my clients. My best teachers are my clients.
Mm.
And one of my first clients phoned me from New York City, and her daughter had just been struck dead by a drunk driver at 10 o'clock at night in New York City. It was a horrible death, very tragic, very traumatic. And one of the first things she said to me on the phone call, my intake call with her, was, I don't do talk therapy. And I'm a talk therapist. I'm thinking, how are
we going to do this?
Yeah. So we just started talking, and I said, do you have any hobbies? And just getting curious about her, And she said, yeah, I like to paint. I went, oh.
Mm.
So the conversation went on a little bit further, and I said to her, hey, you mentioned you like to paint. Instead of talking to me about your feelings, what do you think about doing a painting? And through your painting, showing me the state you are in emotionally.
Mm.
And she went, I could do that? I said, I'd love to see it. What I'm going to ask you to do, though, is once you got the painting done, take a picture of it and send it to me.
Mm.
Then we're going to do another session, and I'll read back to you your painting as if it were a book.
Oh.
She said, okay, good, bye. And she hung up. She was so excited to do some paintings. So she did a series of 9 paintings over 18 months called Pain Has No Color. And you could see her grief transforming from painting to painting.
So expressing grief through painting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It was breathtaking. So that was one. Then I thought, oh, okay, so we've got the artist. I had a woman whose brother was terminal cancer again. And she just didn't know what to do. She loved him so much. And I noticed that she had a really nice piece of fabric hanging behind her. So where'd you get that? She said, oh, I'm a weaver. So I said to her, so your brother spends a lot of time in bed and in a lounger at home, and he gets cold a fair bit, doesn't he? She said, yeah, he's always chilly. So what do you think about weaving him a blanket full of your love for him.
Oh, wow.
And she went, oh my God. So she wove a blanket she
Mm.
called My Life with Brother John.
Oh,
And so she became a grieving weaver and actually created a women's grief club called the Grieving Weavers.
wow.
So,
Creating
that's the,
connection actually. So from
yes,
disconnect and we're not wanting to feel or deep pain to connecting and honoring and
yeah.
oh.
So there's the artist. There's also the talker, like you and I are doing.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with talk therapy. It's just, is it the language of grief for that individual person? Yes or no? It's not that painting's better, it's different.
Mm.
Writing, poetry, lyrics, prose. I with one client, she was a gifted poet. I
Mm.
said, so what do you think about writing a poem
Mm.
to your dad who's getting close to death and then reading it to him?
Oh, wow.
And so she wrote him a poem. It was so yummy,
Mm.
very hard to write in a way.
Of course.
But once it was written, that's her love.
Mm.
And now she can deliver it to her dad and to her mom. And she read the poem in front of mom to dad on his deathbed, right? So
Mm.
there's the writer, there's the mover and the shaker. Some of
Mm.
us are very kinesthetic, very body driven. And so dance. There's a woman who's got a dance school in Langley, BC.
Mm.
She's written a book called Bare, Bare.
Mm.
She teaches people how to use their body to dance their grief out.
Mm.
Because for some of us who are quite sensitive, we can't seem to get the words,
Yeah.
but we can
Move.
get the gestures,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Uh, Sometimes with some clients, Kasim, especially
Mm.
men, we go walking. So we get the body moving. And by engaging the body, we engage the mouth, we engage the heart, and then out comes the healing. So there's the mover and shaker.
When you're sharing this and when I was reading about it as well, I realized that was my style of expressing and working with sorrow. And, I remember when my grandmother passed away, I went for a deep hike in the woods, like no one was around. And I sobbed. Like I needed not to be around anyone to give myself permission to sob and yell. Like that's what I needed,
Yeah.
And then, fast forward and the kind of more recent is losing a pet a couple of years ago as well. And
Yep.
I had an African gray parrot for like 37 years. And he was like a brother of mine, like a little brother, a little birdie brother, right?
Yep.
And just remember going on a hike again. And that's when it just sobbed.
Yep.
So something for me, as you name it, so interesting. This is so useful that, there's no right way to work through sorrow. Is we have to each find what is it for us that can help us. Is it this? Is it and exploring? I guess giving permission to explore what can help me connect with expressing the sorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some people are more natural. Nature is a great teacher. It's also a
Mm,
way of expressing. Some of our greatest architecture spawned from nature,
mm.
you
Yeah.
know? So being out in nature, hugging a cedar tree, dropping to your knees and feeling your hands and your knees and your feet in the dirt and grieving
Mm,
is very powerful. You mentioned your pet.
mm,
Sometimes the grief around our pets is more profound than
mm,
sometimes a loved one
mm.
because our pets have this lack of condition on their love for us,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Unconditional love is so true.
totally. Like,
Yeah.
if I don't clean the litter box for my kitty cats, they
Mm.
still curl up in my lap and purr and love me.
Yeah.
If I leave the toilet seat up in the bathroom, sometimes my wife gives me shit. So when we lose a pet, sometimes we lose that unconditional love
Yeah.
that we're all aching so much to receive from our human
Mm,
partners. So it's sometimes grieving the loss of a pet is more challenging
mm.
than that of a loved one. And there's
Yeah.
no right or wrong about it. It's just wow, the love between the pet and the master or the staff. of the pet. If it's a cat, you're the staff. If it's a dog, you're the master, you know? Uh,
Right.
that love is profound,
Mm,
and the dog feels it too.
yeah.
It's interesting, Kasim, if I'm just a very quick story
Yeah.
around. If you have a dog and its master has died,
Mm,
and the dog has not been able to smell and notice and see and sense the dead master's body, the dog doesn't know his master's dead. The
mm.
dog will wait by the front door forever for the master to come home.
Wow.
Are we any different than the dog?
Mm,
We should tend to the bedside. We should touch the dead body. We
mm,
should see the dead body. We should emotionally feel the dead body. We
mm.
should smell death. Then we know.
Yeah.
Take a lesson from our pets. They do death way better than we do. So pets can teach us a lot,
Oh,
living and in their dying.
what a beautiful way of describing it. Like there's deep wisdom that animals have
Yeah.
of like just honoring that is they're needing to connect and letting us go,
Yeah.
like knowing we're gone, but we need to smell, be with, connect.
And they too grieve.
Yeah. Oh, you're saying this. We have cockatiels now, two cockatiels, and one of them a year ago passed away, and it was amazing. Or actually, 2 years ago passed away, but amazing how the second one knew energy was different.
Yeah.
And when my parrot passed away, both of these cockatiels,
Yeah.
they typically don't fly above his cage because they're scared of him. When he was gone, flew above his cage.
Yeah.
It was just like, what?
Yeah.
It's like this deep, like that brought us to tears. It was like, wow, they know he's gone. Like something is different.
Yep.
Something's different. So they express their own sorrow. Right? Yeah. Did we
100%.
cover the different language, the languages of sorrow?
Yep. There's a few others. There's the seeker,
Mm.
which is more spiritual.
Mm.
And so a seeker will typically be a bit more quiet
Mm.
and may sit in meditation, grieving their ass off, but
Mm.
it doesn't look like it. They may light a candle. They may lay out a bit of a ritual or a ceremony.
Mm.
They may be involved in the pouring of the ashes into the ocean, but they'll
Mm.
do it more ceremonially or more in the form of a ritual. And there may not be the outpouring of tears in that way because they have a strong spiritual belief, but it doesn't mean that they're not grieving,
Right.
right? They're just showing us a different way to grieve.
Yeah.
There may be the avoider, and in actual fact, the avoider is grieving by
Mm.
avoiding. I call them the filer, and you'll find this common with paramedics, firemen, policemen,
Mm.
the military. They just file the shit away. It goes into a filing cabinet because they got to get on with the next client, the next emergency,
Yeah.
next 911 call. They can't linger in the post-emotional feelings of what they just went through.
Yeah.
And so they tuck it away. And so they're dealing with their grief by not dealing with their grief. And there's everything right about that.
Mm.
So how do you work with a fighter? Way different than you work with an artist. Way
Right.
different than you work with a mover and shaker. Way different than you move with a poet
Mm.
or a talker.
So interesting. And have you seen people go to different styles? Because each death is different.
Yep.
Each death, whether it's a pet or a person, some losses impact us deeply, some less deeply.
Yep.
Sometimes even moving impacts us. That's a loss. Or losing a job, a relationship ending. Like
Yep.
there's many forms of loss.
Yep.
And sometimes one form triggers a previous loss.
Yep.
So have you seen where people actually have different styles of sorrow, like dealing? Do they?
Yep.
There's no like one forever, right? It's like you've seen. I'm wondering.
For me, what I noticed is people typically have a primary language and then a secondary language and sometimes a tertiary language. Some people are multilingual in their grief. So they're conversant with the 7 different languages of sorrow. But most have a primary language and a backup language. a bit like being bilingual, French and English in Canada.
Mm.
So they may be a talker, and then they may be an artist.
Mm.
Some people may do well emoting, but then they've got to build a little bit of a special place in their garden. So they use their artistry.
Yeah.
So people will often have two languages, sometimes three, but
Mm.
mostly they have a primary language where they feel most comfortable. And it's also interesting, Kasim, in my family, there were seven of us.
Mm.
There were seven different ways to grieve. So Grandpa Joe dies, my dad, grieved by avoiding it and filing it away.
Mm.
I grieved it by talking about it.
Mm.
My mom grieved it by writing a little love letter to Grandpa. We each had our different way of grieving, right? Which is important because in a family,
Yeah.
there's usually a family way, which doesn't allow the individuals their own way.
Mm.
No, this family goes to church, we sit in the pew and we pray. And there'll be
Right.
tears. But what happens if it's a 6-year-old kid and they really miss Grandpa Joe? They just want to cry. They want to cuddle up in his blanket or his sweater.
Mm.
It's just their way. So learning the seven languages of sorrow as a family unit helps each
Mm.
individual in the family unit recognize their own way to grieve and allows the family to grieve in this kind of orchestra way instead
Mm.
of just one fiddle.
Right. Or forcing it. Like
Yeah,
you have to express it this way. It's like giving
yeah.
ourselves permission to explore what
Yeah.
can really help us and honor our loved one.
Becomes a symphony, not just a fiddle playing. There's a
Mm.
drum, there's a fiddle, there's a bass, there's an electric guitar.
What a beautiful metaphor. It becomes very alive. It's something like an expression. It's not
Yeah.
stale, but this. It's like it's alive, it's moving, it's dynamic, it's changing. And as you're sharing this, like this is so, so useful. And I know on your website, it's something that the listeners or viewers can find you and they can, I think, download that PDF and I'll screen share it in a moment here, but they can download the actual PDF. Is that right through your website? Yep.
Yep.
And I'm thinking, and we'll put about all information in the show notes, your links to your website. What is your website? Best way to reach you, by the way?
Well, I've got a couple. Aliveindeath.com is the best way to get me.
.com?
.com.
Okay.
And I'm currently building a new website, which will be called griefswalkingstick.com, which is all about how to walk with grief in a way that the helper doesn't become a crutch,
Mm.
but a walking stick when needed.
Mm. Maybe we can have a second follow-up about that once it comes live.
That'd be so fun. That'd be
Right?
so fun.
Well, yes, would love that. So I know we went quite over, but this is so captivating. Your work is so heartfelt, so meaningful, so impactful that, I just realized we went over, but it really feels like it's just been like a couple of minutes. It really has been. So I wonder, just to link one more thing, if it's okay, before we end. The seven languages of sorrow, like it's so useful. How would you recommend or suggest for people to start having conversations in their family? Like I'm thinking, print the PDF, and if it's appropriate, go, hey, this is what I discovered. How can people start having conversation about something? Because that's hard.
It is.
Any recommendations for listeners? How can
Well,
you start conversation?
when I teach at Rhodes College, I teach a lot of young people.
Mm.
And they got a lot of parents, and grandparents. Still, nobody's died in their family. And there's this reluctance like, ooh, do I have to really start talking? Well, you don't have to.
Mm.
But it's a good idea if you do,
Mm.
because end of life is coming to us all. And sometimes it's just as simple as picking one family member, like your mom or your dad, and saying things like, I'm just studying in school, or I just read this article, or it's all about becoming more natural with our death and our dying.
Mm.
And I'd like you to go out with a flair and well organized, prepared. So it's not the chaos of death that we're so accustomed to seeing. We start talking about getting ready to go, just casually, lightly, with a bit of fun.
Mm.
It's hard to do, Kasim.
Yeah.
Be a family member that pushes back. Like, when Jody had died, she died in May, and Christmas is coming. And I'm not sitting at the Christmas table pretending that she's not here and that she's not dead. So I said to Mom and Dad, in October, I said, we got to talk about our first Christmas without Jody. Dad walked out of the room.
Yeah.
He didn't want to do it. And I said, Mom, we've got to. Otherwise, we're not honoring Jody. So we had a really awkward conversation initially. It was hard for Dad. God bless him. Right?
Of course. That's his way of dealing with it.
Yeah.
It's not being it.
Yeah. But we called him back. Dad, I know, Dad. I know. I know. And I want to remember Jody with love. She's still part of my life. Can we talk about how Christmas is going to go? I don't want to. I know, Dad. You loved her too, didn't you? And you could see a tear.
Yeah.
When I spoke to him, you loved her too, didn't you, Dad? Yeah. So then I had him. So, okay, you're right, son. We'll talk about it. There was some reluctance, and we spoke about it.
Yeah.
But the first Christmas without Jody was remarkably beautiful, tender, hard, fun, Jody jokes, Jody memories, sadness. She's not here. It's just her picture. But we had a table set for her with her picture there. So she was with the family. And it was meaningful. And it was lovely. And it was hard. So, those words, meaningful, lovely, and hard, that's what the conversation is going to be like with your family.
Yeah.
Because we're so not used to talking about it.
Yeah.
If we don't, we'll have a messy ending.
Yeah.
Guaranteed.
Yeah. So I was thinking both the dealing with a better ending, not having a messy ending, and even if there's no kind of ending coming near, it's just having, like I was thinking this, just having conversation like, oh, this 7 languages of grief, like I find it so useful. Like just talking about like, how are you grieving? How are you doing? Because often someone passes and it's over and we don't talk about it. It's like, how are you doing with this? So this, if listeners find this useful, maybe starting some conversation that can bring love and kindness to this subject that can help us live more fully. This has been so enlightening. Truly, thank you. I so deeply enjoyed it and so deeply honor you and truly, truly have so much love for you and for the deep work that you're doing. Thank you for your courage to really pave this path of opening hearts and opening conversations. And I want to also thank listeners for listening and watching. And if you found this useful, feel free to share, like, and subscribe if you haven't. Until the next time, may your moments be filled with ease and may you be present in as many of them. Thank you.